Hey there, my friends. This is Paul, sitting and using my vocabulary to tell you about A Course in Miracles. Talking about free will and freedom. What the heck is free will? Do you have it? What does it do? How do you do it? What is it capable of? What does it mean? Are you really free, or are you in prison? Let's start off with this. One of my favorite parts of the course is lesson 253. Myself is ruler of the universe. This talks about the deliberateness and mastery of your free will. Myself is ruler of the universe. It is impossible that anything should come to me unbidden by myself. Even in this world, it is I who rule my destiny. What happens is what I desire. What does not occur is what I do not want to happen. This must I accept, for thus am I led past this world to my creations, children of my will, in heaven, where my holy self abides with them and him who has created me. Even in this world, what happens is what I desire. What does not occur is what I do not want to happen. If you have free will, and let's say that your will is completely free, it's 100% free, whatever you will must happen. Cause and effect. If I will it, it shows up. I am a creator. Whatever I create instantly materializes. There is no opposition. There is no interruption. There's nothing preventing that from happening. It's an undivided will, an unopposed will. So if I decide I'm going to create this, it literally must manifest. And there is no force in the entire universe or time and space or in heaven that can stop that. You're completely free to express whatever you want. And so there's nothing that has any power to stop you from doing that. What happens is what I desire, and what does not occur is what I do not want to happen. So it's extremely deliberate, and because you have total freedom, whatever you choose, whether you create or you make, it must occur. Cause and effect. If I am a cause and I cause, there must be an effect. So your will is free because it's unopposed, unrestricted, unrestrained, unlimited. There is nothing anywhere that has any power to steer it in a different direction, interrupt it, pause it, stop it, make it not have effects. If you're very, very clear, Jesus level clarity about your free will, you literally are in command. You are in charge of your freedom, and nothing can happen to you against your will. Absolutely nothing. There's absolute zero victimhood in free will. In the original connotation of world, he talks about how God created man, i.e. souls, sons of God, in heaven, and endowed them with free will. The latter required the endowment of man by God with free will, because all loving creation is freely given. God has free will. God has a will. He can will something. He can create. So he wills the sonship into being and freely gives his will to the beings that he creates, and they too now are endowed with free will, and they are able to will with God if they want to remain free. There isn't anything to oppose God's will. There is no resistance against God's will. Your own will then is an extension of God's will. You want, but it's not that, it says God does not coerce. God doesn't force you to, oh, you have to will with me. He actually has given you freedom. And that it's because you have freedom that he is not pulled into the dream of separation with you, because if your will wasn't kind of independent as a co-creator, and you went into this thing and it was God's will, God would be willing to go into it, and now God would be willing to make dreams of death, and that's just not possible. So because he gave his sons independent free will, whereby they want to share it willingly, and they want to will like God because it brings them joy, their independent freedom allows them to choose or have a choice. If there was a choice, the potential for choosing is still there because they have that freedom. Now, you can use your free will against itself. You can try to freely will that you don't will. And this is miscreation. It's what produces the separation. It's what makes all suffering. If I can find the quote here, let's see. Free will, well, mind, sin, I don't remember if it's sin and guilt, let's see. That's not it, okay, take a word off. Still not it, okay. Never mind, there's a quote that says something like, God gave you freedom, your mind has freedom. There's another statement about how free will is in your mind, not in your soul, because mind is the mechanism of decision, so mind can choose and it can decide what to will. Mind can choose to will with God. It can be used by the soul as a medium through which the soul can extend God's being and create more creations that are like God. Or the mind can try to be its own authority and make up stuff to will against your own will. Jesus even says somewhere that the separation idea came into your mind against your will, i.e. you willed it into being, you willed not to be willing, you became unwilling. So the mind can be used to be unwilling, and when you become unwilling, your mind goes into imprisonment, it goes into a state of resistance, it goes into unwillingness, rejection, it doesn't want to will like God, and so it tries to will an opposite to God, and this is what we get. But it's not possible to have complete lack of will. That would be total non-existence, total death. So even in this world, as he says in Myself is Ruler, even in this world it is I who rule my destiny, you still have free will here. And now the situation is that you've made a situation where there seems now to be a choice, or there seems to be things to choose between. You made perception, and now it seems as though you can either choose to perceive falsely or truly. You're now having to decide, do I want to still be unwilling, or do I want to become free in my willing? Do I want to have free will again, totally free, or do I want to will that I don't have freedom? You get to choose. And choice is the only, I think he says, it's the only freedom that remains for you. It's that you have this choice. Heaven is a choice I must make. This also ties in with the secret of salvation, that you're doing it to yourself. So let's look at free will as this idea of very deliberate causality. Nothing happens unless someone somewhere wills it to happen. Somewhere there has to be a mind causing, and it wills, and then there's an effect. The universe cannot occur unless there's a mind somewhere dreaming of the universe. The trees cannot blow in the wind. The atoms can't have nuclear reactions. The flowers can't grow. The clouds cannot move. The particles of my body cannot divide and separate unless somewhere there is a mind deliberately causing those things to seem to happen. A bird just flew over my head because somewhere there is a mind causing those pieces of the bird to move over my head. It could not have happened unless there was a cause. Somewhere, someone is causing the world. Somewhere, every single thing that occurs must have someone somewhere choosing, willing, causing, or at the very least using will to try not to cause or to try not to will. And even death of the physical body is willful unwillingness. It's a choice. You cannot cannot die without your own consent. You literally have to give your own free-willed consent in order for death to occur, in order for the events to occur, in order for the body to become sick and dead. You have to will it. Somewhere in the mind, somewhere, there's a decision being made, switching between life and death, and somebody is at the helm, and someone has the freedom to choose it. So if you think about the world and your life and everything that happens, and forget for a minute the idea of accidents and randomness and things that don't seem to be free-willed, victimhood, and realize it's almost like a computer simulation where the computer has to very deliberately make some calculations and do something and process something in order to produce an end result, to make an image. So if it wanted to make an image of a tree, there has to be certain steps that are gone through to make that thing show up. And if those aren't gone through, it doesn't show up. So you could say everything in this world, all events, all objects, all movements, all activities are effects coming from some kind of a cause somewhere. So it's kind of like a scene filled with intentional, deliberate, chosen purposes. Even in Sickness is a Defense Against the Truth, it talks about how The only reason that you have this sickness is because you think you have a need for it, and it serves a purpose. The purpose is to protect you from the truth. And so even the sickness is a deliberate, chosen, purposeful thing that you put in place for a reason, to serve you in some way, and it's deliberate. And the prayer that says, I must have made a wrong decision because I'm not at peace. I made the decision myself. If you really grasp the depth of that, it literally means if anything's happening, if I'm sick, if I'm upset, if I'm having reactions, if I'm scapegoating, if I'm asleep, if I'm dreaming, whatever, I must have chosen it. If I'm suffering, I deliberately wanted to suffer. Somewhere in my mind, in some state, there is a state where you are aware, and in the blink of an eye you make a decision, I am going to suffer, and then you go do it, and you make it happen. And then it shows up, and then you're suffering because you made a wrong decision. There are no exceptions to this. There is no other stuff. There's no other reasons why the suffering's happening. If I'm not at peace, if I'm sick, if I'm unhappy, if something's gone wrong, I must have made a wrong decision. And I made it myself, and by making a decision, I caused it to happen. I put it in place, I implemented it, I made sure it came to pass. So it's all totally deliberate. This whole world and everything that happens, the script, all of it is consented by completely free-willed beings. See if I can find this quickly. Sickness is a defense against the truth. Sickness is not an accident. Like all defenses, it's an insane device for self-deception, and like all the rest, its purpose is to hide reality, attack it, and change it. Defenses are not unintentional, nor are they made without awareness. And some people have said to me, oh yeah, you're sick and you're not really aware that you chose it. It doesn't seem that you chose it. You're not conscious of it. It must have been made subconsciously, or some just came out of the unconscious mind or something. Jesus doesn't say that. Jesus says defenses are not unintentional, nor are they made without awareness. They are secret magic wands that you wave when the truth appears to threaten what you would believe. They seem to be unconscious, but because of the rapidity, the quickness with which you choose to use them, so you purposefully use them, in that second, even less, in which the choice is made, you recognize exactly what you would attempt to do, and then you proceed to think it's done. So every form of sickness, if you were totally healthy and sane, and then saw a need for a protection or a defense to keep you safe, you would then deliberately choose, I'm going to put a defense in place, I'm going to separate myself off, I'm going to resist this and try to shut it out of my mind, making myself sick to try to defend myself against the truth. It is made in awareness. Everything is deliberate. Everything is cause and effect. And what that means is there are no accidents. Those who are to meet will meet. The Holy Spirit has planned the curriculum. There are lessons and things that have been agreed to, that you've signed off on, you've given your consent to. Nothing happens without your consent. Even death, you cannot die unless you choose to do so. You have to have consented and said, I agree that I am going to go through the death process, and therefore are choosing it. And not only are you choosing it, but the power of decision is your own. The power in your will causes it to happen. And there is nothing that opposes it. Now, we'll get to it in a minute, talking about an alien will and a divided will. Free will must lead to freedom. The ego is the denial of free will. It is never God who coerces you, because he shares his will with you, and his voice teaches only his will. If God was to oppose your will, he would have to oppose his own will, because he shares his will with you. Both of you have this, at least in heaven, you have the same desire to will the same thing as co-creators in accord with his will, but still free, still independently, freely wanting and willing and choosing and desiring to want to will with God in the same way that he does. In freedom, not under coercion, but just, I joyfully want to will this way because it brings me joy. God, who encompasses all being, nevertheless created separate beings who have everything individually, including free will, and want to share it to increase their joy. So you will with God in order to be joyful, because you love to will the way that you were made to will. When you don't want to will the way you were made to will, you go into the ego, you go into denial of free will, and your will becomes imprisoned. And then you feel as if you don't have freedom. That there is now a separation in your will as a result of split-mindedness. You've willed against your own will, so now you've produced an alien will, a separate will that seems to oppose your own will, and seems now to be choosing something that the other part of you, the rest of your will, isn't choosing. You've got two different kind of decisions happening at the same time, and now you're opposing yourself, you're willing against yourself, you're trying to block the things that you will, and this produces the situation that we're all familiar with, where you seem to be being victimized by an alien will. There's someone else is causing this, it's not me, they're doing it to me, I didn't choose this, I didn't want this, I didn't make this decision to make this happen. There's another will, there's an alien will, a separate will that's cut off and separate from me, that I've disassociated from, that's causing me, making effects. Now I'm getting symptoms because I believe that I'm at the effect of the world, and it's really, not only is it your will doing stuff, it's the rest of your will, your alien will, alienated will, is also doing stuff, and this is all happening in your mind. Excuse me. And both parts are in you still. Which now means, as you go to will something, it seems as though it doesn't have an effect, because there seems to be another will willing something else that kind of gets in the way, cancels your effects, works against you, makes it seem as though things happen against your will, things that there's causes out there that are choosing for you what's going to happen to you, the dream that you're dreaming is turning around and having its own will and its own mind and decision, and now it's trying to choose for you when you're going to live, when you're going to die, when shit's going to happen. And it's not really that there is any other alien will out there. It's that your mind is split, and now you've got a divided will against itself that cancels itself out and produces states of unwillingness and the cancelling of effects. And this seems to strip your will of the power to cause things. So now you find yourself in a position where it seems like I don't seem able to will mind power to will that anything happen whatsoever outside of my body. Because you've sort of allowed yourself to still have some will. I can desire to move my hands, I can choose to go over here or over here with my body, but anything beyond the body, where I've used the body as a separation device and my mind is trapped in my brain, anything outside that seems as though it's totally outside my control, totally beyond my will. I don't have any power over it. I can't seem to choose to change it. I can't will that the house lifts up in the air. I don't seem to be able to make 5,000 loaves and fish appear out of nowhere. It's that you've become, because your will is so split and divided against itself, it has become disempowered and unwilling. And Jesus says somewhere that the world was made of unwillingness, and that's why it seems to be so difficult to change anything in the world, because it's made of this sort of resistance against willfulness, and death is unwillingness. So it seems as though you can't do anything hardly beyond your body, as if you've been totally stripped down of all your willpower to the point where you can barely have power over anything. And now you feel like the whole world out there is victimizing you and has the power to threaten you. And just the mere existence of a separate will, any sense of there's another power, there's another mind, there's another cause other than myself, instantly induces fear. Just the mere idea that there even is something out there which sets the mirror out. Something out there which can choose independently of you, against you, causing things to happen that you don't will to happen, in total violation of your freedom, that can somehow stop your will, can interfere with your will, can make you have effects that you don't seem to want to choose yourself, and therefore can make you dead if it wants to, against your will. So because of this split will idea, not having a whole will, we get into the whole notion of victims, victimizers, suffering, and also the idea that death is caused by anything other than you, the idea that you don't have power over it, the idea that there are things that go wrong on their own. There is randomness, there's chaos, there's conflict is possible because there's now independently opposing wills that are all disagreeing with each other, one of the laws of chaos, and is now inducing states of war and conflict. Just the very idea that anyone is even different to you, that they will and choose something that you don't will and choose, is a state of conflict. If you don't have free will. What A Course in Miracles is trying to get us to do then, as part of the secret of salvation, the owning up to responsibility, not the responsibility that you've sinned, but the responsibility for your freedom, claiming your Christ nature, your causality, this is of course in cause not effect, getting back in touch with your power, becoming able to choose again, not to even get in touch with the idea that you even have a mind and that you can choose and that you did choose, and now that you can make a different choice, to recognize that you're not a victim in any situation, to give you back a clarity about the fact that everything is completely free-willed, deliberate, chosen, so that you're in a position where you can choose to go back to heaven and nothing can stop you. Heaven is a choice I must make. At some point you're going to literally choose, I'm going to heaven now, bye, off you go. Nothing can stop you because you have free will. Now, free will, every single brother, every son of God, every soul God created has free will. In heaven, everyone is in agreement that they want to will in exactly the same way that God intended, or God's will, to joyfully join with him as a co-creator, to share his will and extend his will. So everybody's in a collaboration, an agreement, total unison, unity, and there's no conflict, there's no differences, there's no opposition, there's no people disagreeing. You have that freedom, but you also, there's kind of like there's only one thing to will. You just will creation. The only function of spirit is to extend God's being. In this world, we have to relearn that you still have total, absolute freedom. Being free of the ego is part of this. Accepting the atonement is accepting that you have freedom and nothing has ever happened against your will, and you now will to be with God. In that awareness, there is absolutely no room for any kind of victimhood. There's no room for somebody else willed, their will attacked my will, had power over my will, was stronger than mine, and therefore depressed or depleted or affected or persuaded my will to something that I wasn't really intending to choose, so I made a mistake, and that it produced effects that I didn't really want. And now I'm having this perception that I didn't want this. Wasn't my choice. This is poor me. This is happening against my will. I can't do anything about it because somebody else gets to make the decisions for me. Everybody else is responsible. They have the power. I can't have any freedom. I can't have any choosing. And you just get into this whole bullshit about, it's all based on the belief that you do not have free will. You are in a state of not having choice, not having power, not being able to choose, not being able to, the power of decision is my own, that you could decide something and it must have effects. That you can say, I am not going to be sick. I refuse this sickness that I have chosen, that I put in place. I no longer see a need for it. I do not choose it anymore. Therefore, I now choose that it is not there. And it's gone. Jesus talks about this, about how if you were able to make that decision, there's not one single form of sickness that wouldn't disappear instantly. If you correct the cause and you make a different decision, the effects must change. So what we have to really kind of rediscover is, Jesus keeps telling me this all the time, you're free. You're free. And I keep going, what? What do you mean I'm free? What the heck? What does that even mean? What are you trying to say? How am I free? I don't get it. and I'll be trying to decide to do something, and then he'll make a suggestion, and then maybe I'll resist his suggestion, and then think about doing what I want to do anyway. And even though he's given advice, he will then say, you're free. You can go and do what you want to do if you want to go do it. Still, because you're free, you have free will, you're making the choice. The consequences are up to you, because if you choose something, you are choosing these particular effects, these particular consequences. If you want to go binge eat on ice cream for a week, there's going to be consequences attached to that, probably. That's what you're choosing. And it's funny how many times we go eat certain things that we know we're going to have a reaction to or something, but we do it anyway and then complain about it later and suffer because we were nuts. We made a stupid decision to eat all that ice cream, and now we feel bloated and shitty, and it's kind of funny. So what Jesus is trying to teach us is that you are kind of this independent, free-willed being who is not being coerced by anyone, not being pushed, not being pressured, not being forced, not being guilted. No one's suggesting, if you make that choice, you're a sinner. If you choose this, you're guilty. Shouldn't be doing that. God does not have any of those kind of judgments. He does not say, don't do that. If you do that, I'm going to punish you, or if you do that, I'm going to find you guilty. He doesn't have any of that. He lets you. Some people have a big issue with this, that God allows you to suffer. He allows you to choose that you want to suffer, and that you put the suffering in place and you make yourself suffer. He will not violate your free will. He will not say, I'm going to just stop you doing that. I'm going to take that away from you. If it's what you want, if it's what you will, he will not take it. This is why Jesus talks about how he can't take away your fears, because so long as you want to have them, and you have to admit that you're actually using them for a purpose, they are deliberate, chosen, intentional fears. So long as you're choosing that and you don't want something else, he's not going to come along and just rip it away from you. Jesus talks about your will is as strong as his, and even God would not oppose your will. He also talked about how some of the angels that also fell in the separation, who chose to believe in the separation idea and became part of the dream as well. Some of them are the princes of the world, and they are free to choose to establish their kingdom wherever they see fit. And it's quite interesting that, because it's like he's saying, well, if they want to go be fallen angels and they want to go live in a strange world, a fictional world, and if they want to go experience bodies and have suffering, so be it. That's their choice. It's their freedom. They are allowed to do it. They have permission because they, of their own free will, they've been given this gift. God's like saying, here you go, here's freedom. Go do whatever you want with it. Without any guilt, any judgment, any sinfulness, any condemnation, any accusation that shaming or guilting or blaming that or shoulding that you shouldn't do that. Enlightened beings and God would probably give you advice. If I'm doing something that kind of isn't in my best interests, making a choice. Maybe I'm beating myself up, or having a thought that I'm guilty or that I shouldn't do something. Jesus might say, "Hey, Paul, look at what you're doing here. You're guilting yourself. You may be choosing something in a way that you're hurting yourself. Maybe you would be happier if you don't do that." Without any like, "You shouldn't," or "What the fuck are you doing, you stupid idiot." It's always loving and compassionate, and it's always respecting your freedom. And the interesting thing then is that because God does not coerce, Jesus and the Holy Spirit are not forcing or threatening, no one anywhere is causing you to stay in this world, in this dream. No one anywhere is coercing you or causing you or forcing you to go back to heaven. You are choosing to be here, and when you choose to go home, you will go home. There is nothing imprisoning you. There's nothing holding you down, holding you back, or stopping you, or preventing you from being with God. If you are not with God, you must be choosing not to be with God. And the ego is going to want to come in and say, "Well, look how guilty you are for that stupid mistake." So what I have to learn, and I'm learning, is that I have to, another thing they tell me often is let go, let them get on with it. Stop trying to control people. Learning to respect the free will of every single person. No matter what they're choosing, no matter how destructive, no matter how evil, no matter how sick it makes them, no matter whether it hurts them tremendously and it's the worst thing that they could ever do to themselves, even if they're suicidal, even if they've killed themselves, you still have to respect their free will. As soon as you don't respect their free will, you start becoming controlling, you start becoming manipulative, you start guilting, you start blaming, you start, you slip on this slippery slope of displacing away from your own responsibility for your own free will choice. You start believing that they should be doing something that they're not doing, or they shouldn't be doing what they're doing, and simultaneously believing that the reason why they should change is because they're affecting you against your will. And so now you start, as soon as you start trying to take away their freedom, you start trying to deny their free will choice and start trying to make them guilty for what they've chosen, make them wrong for what they've chosen, try to convince them that they should be doing something else and that they're stupid, or that they are committing a sin, or whatever it is. It's all going to cause you to lose touch with your freedom, because if you try to make anyone else lose touch with their freedom, and you're overstepping the boundaries, and you're not respecting and honoring their space or whatever, it's going to cause you to lose sight of your own freedom, and then you're going to start feeling guilty and sinful and imprisoned and unwilling, and start perceiving that that person's choices are now affecting you, and then finding them to be a scapegoat, and start getting into all this ego shit as a result of the belief that you are not free. The attempt to imprison yourself and to use other people to imprison you. Remember Jesus talking about the prison guard. If you try to imprison your brother, which means you're trying to stop him being totally free, you're not honoring his free will, you're not appreciating his Christ mind, you're not realizing the freedom of choice that he has, and you're getting into all this forcefulness and manipulation and control. You're trying to imprison him. You're trying to like put walls up and steer him in a certain direction and trying to have power over him. And by doing so, you're putting him in a prison, and you will then become his prison guard. And now, in order to maintain that he is this prisoner, you will have to maintain that you are the prison guard. And now, because you are the prison guard, you will now be forced to have to stay outside the prison, near the prisoner, imprisoned, so long as you are imprisoning your brother. So it's like you get tied to them, and your attempt to take away their freedoms takes away your freedom. The only way that you can be free is to completely allow other people to be free. And, you know, obviously you got to be sort of normal and probably not let somebody kill themselves or whatever, but, you know, you got to put out some fires sometimes. But ultimately, you need to get to the awareness that you have an independent free will. They have an independent free will. And because of this, there is nothing that they can do to cause you against your will. Because if your will is always willing, causing, choosing, intentional, deliberate, there's no room there for along comes another will and changes your will. If you're certain, if you're clear, if you're confident, if you're in touch with that power, that you are cause and not at the effect of anything external, not at the effect of your brother's will, then your will is unopposed. There is no alien will, there's no conflict possible, and so we're back to the self is ruler of the universe. It is impossible that anything should come to me unbidden by my will. Even in this world it is I who rule my destiny. What happens is what I desire. What does not occur is what I do not want to happen. This must I accept. If I'm totally unopposed, super powerful, free-willed being, and I cause, there is nothing that can stop that causality. The power of God cannot be opposed. So the whole notion that someone did something to me, someone caused me, my brother affected me, the world has endangered me, something's happening to me, as Jesus says, nothing in the world with the strength or power to bring oppression or cause you to be ill or sad or weak or afraid. Let's find that one, that's a good one. And so, nothing in the world, power. Here we go. Because you're free-willed. How can anything happen to you if you have free will? You have this independent will. You're able to will and choose whatever you want. No one can coerce anybody to go back to God. No one comes to the atonement except willingly. You can't make someone want to wake up if they don't want to wake up yet. You can't cause people to stop choosing to hurt themselves if they don't choose that. If they're totally unwilling, there's just nothing you can do. You have to become patient. Jesus talks about if you want to choose his teaching and listen to him and learn from him, then he will teach you. If you do not want to, then you'll go away and he will become patient and he will wait for you until you're ready, until you're willing, and until you then choose to go in the direction of his teaching. He does not force you. He's not like sitting there getting impatient. He has infinite patience. So let's see if I can search for world. It is your thoughts alone that cause you pain. Nothing external to your mind can hurt or injure you in any way, because you can only will it against yourself. Your own thoughts, your own willing, your own choosing and desiring is the only thing that can cause you pain. If you suffer in any way, you must have chosen it. Even if you're not currently aware of it, you must have chosen it. Nothing external to your mind can hurt or injure you in any way. There is no cause beyond yourself that can reach down and bring oppression. No one but yourself affects you. There is nothing in the world which has the power to make you ill or sad, or weak or frail. But it is you who have the power to dominate all things you see, with your free, unopposed will, where you cause and the effects must occur. Merely by recognizing what you are, if you're in touch with your Christ nature, you are not opposing yourself, and so now you do not have an alien will. There is nothing resisting you. You have power. You have unlimited causal power to do anything. As you perceive the harmlessness in them, they will accept your holy will as theirs. And what was seen as fearful now becomes a source of innocence and holiness. So by recognizing your free will, I'm the one choosing it. I must have chosen this. I'm choosing something else. This is what I choose. I choose not to be sick. I choose I'm going to be happy. I choose not to suffer today. And realizing that when you really strongly make that choice, it has power to cause what you're choosing. There was one day where I rubbed my eye too much and irritated it, and then it was starting to threaten that it was going to develop into some kind of thing, getting all red and stuff, and I was pissed. I was mad about it. I was not going to have this. Jesus says, choose, decide. So, okay, with my free will, I choose I'm not going to have this fucking thing. God damn it, I choose I am not going to have this. I refuse. Fuck it. Fuck it. I'm not having it. Certain, firm, absolute, making a powerful choice. It did not turn into anything. It disappeared quickly. I chose not to suffer. Your choosing is the opposite of fear. When you're in fear, you can't choose and you're uncertain. I am not weak but strong. I'm not afraid but all-powerful. I am not uncertain but very, very certain. Firm, conviction, powerful in your willing. That if you choose that something be a certain way, it must be that way. If you do not choose, it will not be that way. And we don't realize that we have this much power, this much choosing ability, this much literal force, supernatural strength, whereby you can literally choose something and it must happen. We're so used to being disempowered victims at the effect of other wills, believing that we didn't choose, believing that we didn't want it, believing we didn't will it, out of touch with our will, out of touch with our freedom, out of touch with choosing and having an option or an ability to say, I will not have this. No. I will have this, yes. And exercising it so that you don't have to tolerate suffering. You don't have to put up with bullshit. You don't have to go along with sickness that you've done to yourself in the first place. So quite often now when I go into fear and I'm uncertain and I'm worried about what's going to happen, Jesus might chime in and say, choose. It's like I'm just sitting on the fence wavering and not committing to anything. Choose. Okay, I choose that this happen this way. I choose that this not occur. And then you start finding that it happened the way you chose, and things didn't happen that you didn't choose because of your certainty and your power. And that also ties into the rules for decision. What kind of a day do you want? I choose that I'm going to have this kind of a day. I am. And because it's so focused and unwavering and single-minded, wholehearted, free from contradictions, free from uncertainties, and maybe there's another option, maybe I wanted something else instead. Single, clear, focused, clearly defined choice is powerful. Nothing can oppose your will, says Jesus. And so then you get into realizing that all victimhood is just you losing touch with free will. All problems that happen where you think I now have to do a forgiveness is all because of you've lost sight of that person has freedom and so do you. Their freedom has not affected your freedom. They have not willed anything against you. You are not experiencing anything at the effect of any other will. If you so choose, this is what you get. I choose this, I get this, I want this, I choose it, I get it. It's the kind of power that we've got to get into instead of all this, well, I don't know if that's going to happen. I wonder if it'll go that way. Who else is choosing it? We have this huge ego belief that there's something else out there external to our own mind with a power and a will and a mind and a choice choosing for us, that is responsible for us, that we want to manipulate in order to get it to indirectly choose on our behalf the things that we think we want, the effects that we prefer, to have it affect us and do things to us that we like as victims. Something negative happens to you, you think, oh, that's me, I'm being victimized. Something positive happens to you, you're also being victimized. You're not supposed to be at the effect of anything. It's all supposed to be coming out. You're extending God's will. It comes out of you and causes. There's no room for stuff comes in and it attacks me, things happen to me, I'm being affected. That's making me afraid. That's making me happy. You're not supposed to be happy because of external shit. You're happy because you're extending happiness. You're giving happiness and sharing the love. That's why you're happy. So what that leads to, eventually, for all of us, as stated in this lesson, myself is ruler of the universe. I mean, if you're ruler of the universe, don't you think that means you have power over everything and you get to choose what happens? It's impossible that anything come to me unbidden by myself, even in this world. It's impossible. Not like maybe some things do. Absolutely nothing comes to me unbidden by myself. Sense the power in that. Sense the causality in that. If that were the case, imagine how nothing can ever affect you ever again. Nothing comes to you unless you choose it. Even in this world, it is I who rule my destiny. What happens is what I desire. What does not occur is what I do not want to happen. There's no wiggle room, there's no room for any exceptions here. I am the cause of the world. I am the dreamer of the dream. I am choosing what the heck is going on. If I don't want it to go on, it's not going to go on. What does not occur is what I do not want to happen. I don't want that to happen. It does not happen. When you can accept this, you're in a position of total freedom from victimhood, because now you're recognizing I am completely free of any other causes. I am completely free of all causes of death. I am completely free of attack. I am absolutely invulnerable. Nothing can affect me. Nothing can oppress me. Nothing can make me sick. Nothing can hurt my body. If I don't say so, nothing can hurt my body. I cannot die unless I choose to do so. I do not give my consent for such and such to occur. It cannot occur. You have mastery, you have power, you have will. Your will has been freed or set free by your removal of the blocks to awareness, and your belief that other people's wills cause your will imprisons your will and makes it seem as though you don't have any willpower and you can't cause things and you've been victimized. If it's all coming out of you, you're writing the writing on the wall. You're the one painting the pictures. You're the one expressing love, extending God's power. There is no way to oppose God's will. When your will is free, it must mean, free will leads to freedom, must mean that your will is now in accord with God's will. You're lining up with natural expression of will as God intended it and created it, the extension of His will. You're willing with Him, co-creating, and nothing is opposing it. There is no enemy, there's no opposition, there's no opposite, there's no attacker. It was you all along, choosing everything, willing everything against yourself. This is the secret of salvation. I must have done it to myself. Doesn't matter how the situation looks, no matter who seems to victimize, no matter who does what. It must always be true. Whatever I'm experiencing, I have chosen it. I must have made a wrong decision because I'm not at peace. No matter what the effects are, I put them there. No matter how severe it is or who seemed to attack who, still this is true. Let's go find this, because this is such a powerful motherfucker of a statement. Let's see. And it's this single lesson learned will set you free. Secret of salvation. It's in the Hero of the Dream section. Secret. The secret of salvation is this, that you are doing this unto yourself. You're willing it against yourself, nobody else is. No matter what the form of the attack, this still is true. Whoever takes the role of enemy and attacker, still, this is the truth. Whatever seems to be the cause of any pain and suffering that you feel, this is still true, that you're doing it to yourself. No matter what seems to be the cause of any pain in the body or mind, any kind of suffering, sickness, attack, damage, anything, this is still true. For you would not react at all to figures in the dream that you knew that you were dreaming. You are dreaming the world. You're causing the world. You're making the world. You're willing the world. That's why you have power over it. It's why whatever you say goes. Let them be as hateful and as vicious as they may, they could have no effect on you. Unless you fail to recognize it's your dream, because then you're starting to get into, I'm not the one willing this, somebody else is willing this, and you're making yourself a victim. You're saying, I don't have freedom to choose, someone else is choosing for me, I'm being willed against my will. This single lesson learned will set you free from suffering, whatever form it takes. The Holy Spirit will repeat this one inclusive lesson on deliverance until it has been learned, regardless of the form of suffering that brings you pain. Whatever hurt you bring to him, he will make answer with this very simple truth. For this one answer takes away the cause of every form of sorrow and pain. The form affects his answer not at all, for he would teach you but the single cause of all of them, no matter what their form, and you will understand that miracles reflect the simple statement, I have done this thing, and it is this I would undo. And by then choosing, I will no longer do this. It must vanish. I did this thing. I must have made a wrong decision. I made the decision myself. I chose this. I willed this. I put the suffering there. I made it happen. And it is this that I would undo with my free will. I will choose again. I'll allow the Holy Spirit to undo the consequences of my wrong decision and be free from suffering. This is the secret of salvation, the single lesson that you need to learn. Even if there's an entire freaking workbook full of lessons, there's one lesson. The secret of salvation is the only lesson that you need to learn. And it takes all these other forms, and there's other paths and different lessons and different aspects and things that the workbook helps you with. But ultimately, there's one thing that you need to learn. You're doing it to yourself. Because of your free will, nobody else can do it to you. It is impossible that anyone can affect you against your will. It's impossible that you can die if you don't want to. It's impossible. Your free will can never be violated. It has the strength of God in it. It is permanently free. You are permanently free in God. So you can never be hurt against your will. You can never be attacked. The only way you can ever suffer is if you do it to yourself. As Jesus says, you cannot be hurt unless you hurt yourself. You own up to the fact that you did it, but you don't have to own that the sin is real and it's permanent and I can't do anything about it. You go past that to own up to the free will, to the power that you have, the causality that you have, and then you exercise your free will and choose again and set yourself free from suffering. I freely will to be with God. I freely will to be healed. I freely will not to have cancer. I freely will not to have heart disease. I choose I do not have a stroke. I am completely as God created me. I choose to accept that I'm as God created me, and all this stuff is bullshit that I put in place to pretend to suffer, that I'm being caused by someone else, to disown my freedom. I reclaim my freedom. I take back my power. Fuck it! Anyway, so, free will. You have it. You're totally free. No one is pressuring you, causing you, pushing you, forcing you. You have to come back to God of your own free will. So does everybody else, which is why you have to let people make their own choices and give them the room to become willing of their own free will. They have to want it. And everyone will eventually want it, because tolerance for pain is not without limit. Maybe this lifetime, maybe not. Got to accept, got to allow, let go, let them be free, let them choose, let them come to the desire to want to be happy again. You can offer advice, you can make suggestions, you can give guidance, you can show an example of a better way, you can demonstrate, you can teach, you can help them to understand what they're doing to themselves, you can point out things, you can do all this stuff. But if it gets into trying to force them, now you're overstepping the boundaries of your free will and moving into, I have power over you, I'm going to force your free will to be violated, I'm going to make you fucking obey me. That's totally ego, that's being a tyrant, that's the tyrannical rule that comes from imprisoning your own will. The dictates of tyrants. Be free. I think I'm going to stop there, stop yakking. Have a nice day. Hopefully this was helpful. Love you. Bye. See you next time.